A visit here, a promise there, and never far away from a cheesy photo op. Boris Johnson's first month as Prime Minister felt like the campaign never finished. Crisscrossing the country, but unlike his predecessors, not crisscrossing the continent until this week, with visits to Berlin tomorrow and Paris on Thursday for the first face-to-face encounters with the main EU leaders. It won't be a warm welcome. Having digested the 4-page letter from Boris Johnson to EU Council President Donald Tusk demanding the removal of the backstop last night, the EU gave it the thumbs down. On Twitter, Donald Tusk said those against the backstop and not proposing realistic alternatives in fact support re-establishing a border, even if they do not admit it. By mid-afternoon, tit-for-tat exchanges were being fired both ways across the channel.
It is absolutely true that our friends and partners are a bit negative. And you were getting, I saw what Donald Tusk had to say, and it, wasn't redolent of a sense of optimism. But I think actually we'll get there. I think there is a real sense now that something needs to be done with this backstop. We can't get it through Parliament as it is.
But ahead of tomorrow's meeting, Angela Merkel managed to sound more positive, albeit without promising changes to the withdrawal agreement.
I've always said that when one has the will to find these solutions, one can do so in a short period of time. The EU is ready to find a solution, but for that there is no need to reopen the withdrawal agreement. It's a question of future ties. Britain needs to decide which way it goes.
Ministers aren't busying themselves thinking about alternatives to the backstop because they think the blockage in the negotiations is much closer to home.
Have you come up with a solution to the backstop?
No, not personally, no.
They think Brussels is watching to see whether MPs do what protesters up and down Whitehall demand day in, day out, and stop Brexit altogether. If they don't, then they hope the EU will engage more constructively along the lines Boris Johnson is suggesting. Buried in Boris Johnson's 4-page letter to Donald Tusk were lots of clues about how he might pursue Brexit. He wants a more distant relationship with the EU, for instance, than the one envisaged by Theresa May, giving himself the ability to pull away from EU standards on products, on environmental protections and on workers' rights. He's also not a fan of international agreements, meaning it'll be harder for the EU to enforce guarantees made by Britain in this set of negotiations. But will it be enough for Tory Brexiteers? But even if Boris Johnson pulls off the seemingly impossible and gets the EU to drop the Irish backstop, this may not be enough for some of his own.
I will have to take a long, pragmatic look at whatever the EU offers the Prime Minister. This is now a high-stakes game, and I think it'll come down to the margins.
With criticism growing, MPs are demanding a say. But Parliament is on holiday for another fortnight and the government is just ignoring recall petitions like this one. As he prepares to fly to Berlin tomorrow, however, Boris Johnson won't be able to avoid the unvarnished views of EU neighbours any longer. Sam Coates, Sky News.